And we do have people who have started a little bit later and maybe aren't able to fully retire at the quote traditional retirement age. And then that's a conversation. Well, how long are you willing to work? And also, is that job sustainable? Will your employer keep you employed through the period of time that you need? Those are things you need to start to discover. Welcome to Tell Your Boss I Quit with me, Pete Gutekunst, the podcast where we help you financially bridge from where you've started to the life goals you've imagined.
Hey, Pete, let's talk about delayed retirement savings. So when somebody starts late in their life, what are some tools or some advice, I guess, that you could give when people are trying to evaluate their current financial situation to understand the impact of this delayed retirement savings?
Yeah, when people are starting late, a lot of times they think they're starting late. And that's why so many times people come to us is, I'm getting close and now I really need to start paying attention. And so a lot of times that is merely taking inventory and getting yourself squared away to measure things. But I think when you think you're starting late, you really have to take stock of what your primary goals are. If you're prepared to find out that you might have to work a bit longer, there are things you can do. You could choose to work longer. You could choose to work a little bit in what we'll call semi-retirement or kind of dialing it back. And maybe you can ramp up what your savings after kids or maybe through college, something along those lines. You might have some excess cash flow. So there are things that you can do, but I think that the most important thing is, you'll hear this all the time. The best thing you can do is start saving as early as you can. And so if you think you're late, this is as early as you can. Get right on it and start doing your planning now.
You know, sometimes we might be in panic mode if we feel like we're starting late. So what are the things that we can do? Like, how do we know how much to put away? We've had conversations before, but how do we know how much to put away to make sure we're going to retire right? Which means I'm okay if I have to give up some Starbucks or, some other pleasantries in life. If I'm 55 years old, what if I had zero savings for retirement right now? What would you say to me?
So that's really, in my book, Tell Your Boss I Quit, I spend a great deal of time in the beginning of the book talking about measuring what it is that you spend and what your lifestyle costs. And you mentioned Starbucks and things like that. So are there things in your world that you may discover if you gave them up, you have the means to retire or retire sooner? And you may discover, and I think this is really the most important part of that exercise, is I don't want to give them up. I like my lifestyle. And we do have people who have started a little bit later and maybe aren't able to fully retire at the quote traditional retirement age. And then that's a conversation. Well, how long are you willing to work? And also, is that job sustainable? Will your employer keep you employed through the period of time that you need? Those are things you need to start to discover. But I think what you need to do is it always comes back to goals, and it always comes back to your lifestyle and what does that lifestyle cost? And then if we measure to the point that we don't have enough, is there something you can give up to make costs less? Or can you work a little bit longer so that you can build up more savings and also have a shorter retirement period that you need to fund? Those are the sacrifices and the challenges that you need to measure before it's too late.
Okay, so you just gave me a couple strategies. What are some things I can do with like my 401k or my IRA to maximize contributions now?
Well, we're talking about, you're asking me about people coming at it a little bit late. And the IRS has understanding of that people might have the ability to save more later in life or need to save more later in their working years. So there actually are catch-up options. So for example, right now in 2024, and that'll change year by year, but in 2024, you can put in 7,000 into your IRA, but if you're over 50, you can do an extra 1,000. So that's 8,000. Well, I don't know if an extra 1,000 is going to move the needle, but that's money that you can add in addition to the traditional IRA or a Roth contribution, if you're eligible to do a Roth contribution. The 401k option. $23,000, you can do an extra $7,500. So you could actually do $30,500 into your 401k as long as you earn that much in your paycheck. That's how much you can set aside. What I have seen are people who their employer plan says, how much do you want to put in? And they might check a box that says something like max contribution, or they might actually enter the most that they can do somehow by a percentage. If they don't elect that catch-up option, it won't do the extra 7,500 in this case. So you want to be able to make sure that just because you think you're doing everything you can, first of all, make sure operationally you've checked that on your retirement plan. Those are the things that you can do. And again, at this stage of life, one of the most common things are your children have grown, moved out of the house or close to it, and expenses for taking care and raising your kids and putting them through school have come down. So maybe your lifestyle still costs the same, but now you have some excess cash flow. That's a great time to reassess what you're putting into your retirement plan, either through these catch-up options at work, or you can always invest in a non-qualified investment. It doesn't have to go into a retirement plan like an IRA or a 401k. Saving for the future is key. And that's really where you want to be able to make sure you're taking advantage of all of the options that are available to you.
That brings up my next question. You were talking about the limitations through like a 401k or an IRA. There's certain things you can do. So when we're ramping up our actually personal savings, like how does that help us mitigate for the future? Or should we actually be investing in something? Or do we really want to get our savings up there? Like how do we juggle that?
Yeah, that's also a pretty common question, I would say. Getting yourself to a level of cash reserve is an important thing at any age. Now, where that cash level should be, think about what would happen, if your furnace went, your roof went. What is the kind of thing where I just really need money and it's really grateful to have it there in reserve? So that number could be 10, it could be 20, it could be even more than that, 20,000. On the other hand, some people, what I always ask is, what's your sleep at night number? And some people say, I've got 50,000 in cash and I know anything can kind of come at me and I'm okay. If the markets aren't cooperating and I need to get some money, I'm okay. And I think that's perfectly okay. That's your sleep at night money. But in talking about what we should be doing with investing, if that sleep at night number is 25 for you, I think that's an adequate cash reserve. Then, and you have 50, well, there's 25,000 that's sitting around that's not invested. And how did you get to 50,000? Do you have that excess cash flow? That could be put into your future savings. So I think it's really important that you have that cash reserve. I think it's important, especially at the point of retirement, because there might be some larger expenses just as you go through. That's not uncommon to have some expenses right before or after retirement to sort of set up life at that point. So it's not a bad idea to have cash reserves. On the other hand, having way too much is a huge missed opportunity. So I would ask yourself, how well do you sleep at night with the money you have in cash? And start with that. And if you're over that number, there's a missed opportunity to invest if it's still in cash.
That makes sense. We just talked about maxing out your IRA or 401k, figuring out how much savings you should have. And then you're talking about that excess savings. When we get to that point and we're talking about late life, getting ready for retirement, what are some appropriate investment vehicles now that I can do with that extra money? That same example where you're talking about, if you're good with $25,000 for your safety net and you've got 50 in there, now we've got 25 that we can play with to grow our retirement because we've maxed everything else out. What are some vehicles that we can use?
Well, there's a number of different options. You can always contribute to an IRA. I mean, that's always an option. Whether or not you can deduct the contribution against your taxes or not, that's another question. You might be eligible, depending on your income, to contribute to a Roth IRA. Also, not a bad option and similar to the non-deductible IRA contribution. So you're putting money into a vehicle that once the money's in there, it's going to accumulate tax deferred, and that's obviously an advantage. The Roth IRA, when money comes out after 59 and a half, that's going to come out tax-free as long as you've had the Roth for 5 years. So those are great things to do if you're not utilizing them. Might not be something that you're eligible to do. Maybe you're already doing and you're maxed out. So then where do you go? There's nothing wrong, like I said earlier, about it doesn't have to go into a retirement vehicle. Don't forget that a regular investment is going to have, generally speaking, especially on the stock side of things, is going to have capital gain treatment. So that's not as high of a tax bracket. You're right now 15% of your income is high enough. 20% is going to be the capital gain rate for the sale of a stock at the point of when it's sold. The dividends that stocks pay, that income is also a qualified dividend, which is treated as capital gain as far as the income tax rates are. And stocks in general don't spin off a lot of income. The S&P 500 is an index, I think, is about 2.5%, just ballparkish. So you're not getting a lot of taxable income anyway, but you're getting the accumulation. So it's not a tax deferred investment, but it's not a horrible taxable thing. And then, of course, right now interest rates are high. Maybe you want to put money into something that's a high interest rate. That's a safe, comfortable investment. Yes, it's going to be taxable, but the tax brackets, if you're at the 22% bracket, the 24% bracket, that's not a huge burden. And so really, I think the most important thing is we ask them, where do I put it? How do I save? What's the best vehicle? Really is, if you have the capacity to save, get it saved. Do that first. That's really important. And then how are you going to be taxed? Can I do this in a more tax efficient way? Do I have an opportunity to invest in something that has the potential to do better than another investment? What's the risk and reward of that decision? They all come along the way. But first, you got to figure out how much you can free up to save, because none of this happens without that. And sometimes we put the cart before the horse and ask all these other questions about the best vehicle. The best vehicle is finding out and getting that excess income, that inheritance, whatever it might be, found money, put it to work for your future.
Let's pivot over to the employer-sponsored retirement plans. How are these helping mitigate the risk of these delayed savings for retirement when people are starting late?
Well, one of the things about the employer plans is many employers still offer a match contribution. So I would say if you're not contributing enough to get all of the employer match, you should be doing, and I would say this at any age, if you can get at least your contribution to match the match contribution, so you're getting 100% of what you can from your employer, make sure you're doing that. And then the other advantage on employer plans are, I mentioned, even with the catch-up option, the IRA being at $8,000 limit for 2024, but you could do $30,500 into a 401k plan. So there is a way for you to get money pre-tax or avoid taxation on the 401k, the employer type of plan, at a much higher level than you can just on your own. So the employer offers a lot of value in that respect. You can put more of your own money and avoid taxation. By doing so, you can get some of their money. And in addition to that, employers might have other profit sharing contributions. There might be other elements that they provide, and you really want to try to take advantage of everything that they can offer you, because if they're going to put money on the table, you don't want to leave it behind.
And I want to talk about this finally, talking about delayed retirement savings. I don't think it takes a financial advisor to tell me that, the more that I adjust or downsize, the more I can save. But if you could kind of help me wrap my mind around some of the advantages of downsizing, especially this late in life, so that I guess it makes it easier to swallow. Are there some certain tricks that you have that you've talked with your clients in the past?
I love that term, downsizing. I always say downsizing doesn't necessarily mean down spending. And so downsizing, if you sell your home and buy a smaller home, if it's a newer home, it might not be that much of a difference as far as the cost, if there's still a mortgage, especially if you have a lower interest rate mortgage from 10 years ago and you're taking out a mortgage now in 2024. So downsizing doesn't always mean down spending. So those are the things that's really talking about measuring what your spending is. The beauty of doing planning is, especially before you actually are at the threshold of retirement, is that you can prepare and think about and try out how things are going to go. Can I afford to live a lifestyle on a little bit less if that's something I'm going to need to contemplate? Because you still have the paycheck coming in. So if you can try to live on less than the full paycheck, then you can kind of identify, yes, I could make that work. But if you can't, or you have a month where you can't, the paycheck's still coming in. So you have some flexibility to figure that out. You could think about, well, what if I didn't have a mortgage and I had this same income coming in? Well, that would be tremendous to have that extra cash flow. And then can I sell my house, downsize to your point, and forego a mortgage or cut it down if that's a possibility. But I think the downsizing question has a lot to do with quality of life. And I think we talk a lot about the numbers and the dollars and all of that, but it has a lot to do with quality of life. You're going to have to shovel snow and, get the lawn cut and take care of the flower beds and all that. Whether you're paying someone to do that or not, you're still the general contractor at a minimum in a traditional single family home. So maybe downsizing is just taking on less and freeing up your lifestyle to leave the house and everything's taken care of. If say it's a townhome community or something, if that's what downsizing looks to a person. I think you have to think of it in those terms, because the dollars, you can manage to spend less in a household where you are. And I think that's really the critical piece. The only way you can take money out, if you have the excess capital to take out of your house and you got enough money left over, that's a whole other story. So now you could, if you really can sell your home and buy something else for less and have money left over, that could be new capital that's part of your investments that could generate income. That might be what downsizing looks for some people. But again, you need to take the time to measure that. And that's what good planning is. That's why you work with a professional to really roll up your sleeves and do all of that measurement and thinking and asking the right questions.
So we've been talking a lot about getting caught up. What are some of the risks and opportunities if let's say you're 55 like me, and we're high earners and we're trying to get caught up, something that we should have done when we were 20? How do we navigate that?
Yeah, the thing is with getting caught up, we'll say, is it comes down to your capacity to save and what you have available. And I think the financial services industry tells everyone the best time to invest is now. Start as early as possible, and you'll do the math, and you could tell a young person at 30, you could save, $100, $200 a month and do that until you're 65 and you'll have $1 million, something like that. I don't know the exact numbers, but you get the idea. But if you told that same person, well, but if you waited until you were 40, just 10 years later, maybe you have to save $1,000 a month to try to get to the same place, or maybe even more. And the truth is that by the time a person is 55, in those scenarios, in those early saving examples, by the time they're 55, they have a lot of money that's accumulated, and they're still doing their $100 or $200 a month for maybe the next 10 or plus years until they actually, quote, retire and get to that big nest egg number. So here's the saving grace to the later starter, or the person who waited and raised their kids and now, has this excess cash flow because they're at their peak earning years. And this is the opportunity: is you might not have your big number already saved by the time you're 55. And the advantage or opportunity for you is that what happens to the investment markets in the next 10 or 15 years is not going to be as dramatic to you, because that young person at 55 is going to have a big number and they need it to maybe double in the next 10 years, let's say. For you, you're just putting money in. And if the market is not cooperating, you're getting good buying opportunities. If it is cooperating, great, market values are going higher. But you have the opportunity to really sock a lot of money away if you have that excess cash flow. And that's where I think the opportunity for the person who's in their 50s is they might discover that they could do more. But if you don't give a purpose to dollars, if you don't give them something to do, dollars always find a way. They always find a way to get spent on something. Or if they don't, you end up with a lot of money in a very low yielding investment or savings cash account. That's, I think, the saving grace. If you're starting late, just don't panic. Don't worry so much. You just got to sit down and measure and say, what can I do? And what's it going to get me to? And I think that actual opportunity or probability of hitting that number in some respects is a lower risk because you don't need your money to double like that younger person does at 55. You just need to really sock a lot away and get yourself as caught up as quickly as possible. So there's a lot of opportunity, but it all comes back to measuring, planning, and doing good work.
Do you have people come in that are like high earners and they're like, I'm 50 years old. Do I need to be socking $7,500 away and, to retire? Or like, do you get people that are coming in panic mode?
Panic mode's not quite the right word for it. What I find are the people who come with the most worry or, in your way of saying panic mode, they're if they come to me, they're typically a little better off than they think they are. I've had people call me, I'm never going to retire.
Yeah.
And then I ask them a couple of questions. Well, you have a pension, and you have, Social Security is going to be this. And, remember that high earning person is going to have a higher Social Security too. It's not going to be as big of a replacement of income percentage wise, but it's going to be a nice chunk of income. So that's what I find is I just had a woman a week or so ago was really worried. And I think she's probably or we could surmise that she could retire with 500,000. So it wasn't nothing, but it wasn't a couple million either. And if you go on, if you search or, do something, they'll tell this person needs, X million dollars to retire or whatever. But she had a pension. Her husband is in he's not 65, but he's on disability with Social Security. So that money's coming in. She's still working. So I forget what she had, but she, so that wasn't nothing. But, for a person, she wasn't at $1 million. I think she was less than 500,000 and she was really worried, but she had a lot of income that was going to come in from other things that she didn't really, I started writing it down. I was like, well, here's your Social Security. Here's your pension. You just told me you're willing and doing and like what you do. So you'll keep working for 5 more years. And yet you're 65. If we want all this money coming in right now, you could. In fact, I think that was part of it was the pension's got to start at 65. So that's what I find is people have things all over the place and they never measure. They know what they have in dollars. They don't know what it can do for them. So when they're in panic mode, I have one client who I would say has adequate investments, probably not enough. And they kept doing way too much for their grown kids. And I kept saying, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And every year it's, my spending isn't going down. I'm like, well, your kids are 35. Let's go. Well, their kids just failure to launch,
Yeah.
And I thought it's sooner or later you got it, and I hate being in that situation. Those are the ones I guess that's the panic mode. They're the ones that don't panic. They're just like, what do I do? I got to spend it. And you just kind of share with them, well, this is where it's going. You might have to cut back someday. Thank you for listening. And if our discussion resonates with you, let's start a conversation about what matters most to you. Go to goodfinancial.com, click contact, and schedule a 30-minute chat. I'd love to hear from you.